In the soft hush of a winter morning somewhere in the quiet town of Ulm, in the kingdom of Württemberg, a small life began its slow, deliberate unfolding. The date was March 14, 1879, and the world had not yet taken notice of the infant who would one day bend the understanding of time and space. Albert Einstein entered the world in a modest home, surrounded by the gentle hum of ordinary life. His father, Hermann Einstein, an engineer and a man of practical mind, had a calm demeanor, and his mother, Pauline Koch, possessed a quiet warmth, which filled their home with a sense of gentle order and understated expectation. The young Albert, though a small and seemingly ordinary child, displayed moments of deep contemplation. In the warmth of the home study, he would watch the shadows dance across the walls, fascinated by the simple yet mysterious play of light. Those early observations, simple as they seemed, would gradually become the seeds of curiosity that nurtured a life of profound intellectual exploration. Observing the patterns in the world around him, young Albert began to sense a rhythm, a subtle orchestration that whispered hints of the deeper structures underlying everyday phenomena. Albert's childhood was marked by a certain solitude, though not loneliness. He was a thinker, more attuned to the invisible patterns in the world than to the ordinary chatter of children his age. In the quiet moments of reflection, he would ponder objects, their movements, and their forms. A spinning top fascinated him for hours, not merely as a toy, but as a phenomenon to be understood. Why did it move the way it did? How did it resist the pull of the world as it spun? Even in these small, almost imperceptible experiments of a child's making, there was a glimpse of the meticulous observation and persistent questioning that would come to define his later life. Education began in the local schools, where the young Albert was not immediately recognized for the exceptional mind that lay beneath his unassuming presence. Teachers often noted his slow pace in conforming to conventional learning methods, his mind wandering into corridors of thought that seemed unrelated to the day's lessons. Yet beneath this apparent distraction, there was a steady accumulation of understanding, a silent absorption of the principles that governed the natural world. While other children recited facts and rules, Albert engaged in silent experiments of the mind, mentally arranging and rearranging ideas, testing them against one another with patient diligence. The family's relocation to Munich introduced Albert to a new rhythm of life. In Munich, he encountered the burgeoning energy of industry and science, a hum of activity that contrasted with the quiet of Ulm. Hermann's work in electrical engineering exposed the young Albert to devices and concepts that stirred his imagination. He would spend hours examining the workings of electrical apparatus, marveling at the flow of current, the interplay of magnets and coils, the invisible forces that could make a machine hum with life. Here, in these modest experiments and observations, the young mind was learning to perceive the hidden symmetries and structures in the world, the delicate connections that rendered the visible patterns intelligible. At home, Pauline nurtured Albert's artistic sensibilities, ensuring that his curiosity extended beyond the confines of practical mechanics. Music, in particular, became a quiet companion to his growing intellect. He found solace and inspiration in the piano, the gentle cadence of melodies paralleling the rhythms he discerned in the movements of light and matter. The music offered a sense of harmony, a bridge between the emotional and the intellectual, teaching him to recognize patterns not only in numbers and forces, but also in sound and feeling. In this fusion of science and art, the young Albert's mind was quietly preparing for the synthesis that would later characterize his approach to the universe itself. Curiosity, gentle but insistent, guided Albert's every step. He developed an early fascination with geometry, captivated by the elegance of lines, curves, and angles. There was a tactile quality to his engagement. He would trace shapes with his fingers, fold paper into intricate forms, imagine the movement of planes and solids in space. These exercises were more than play. They were an intimate conversation with the abstract principles that governed reality. And as he explored these forms, he was also learning to think spatially, to visualize the subtle relations between objects, an ability that would later prove indispensable in conceptualizing the vast and elusive structures of physics. Though the young Albert's temperament leaned toward introspection, He was not entirely removed from the human world around him. He experienced moments of friendship, laughter, and the quiet contentment of shared play. Yet even in social interactions, there was a reflective quality to his attention. He observed his companions with careful curiosity, noting patterns of behavior, anticipating reactions, and silently integrating these observations into a larger understanding of human nature. This capacity for attentive observation, both of the physical and social world, would become a hallmark of his character, a persistent, gentle probing into the hidden order of all things. One of the defining experiences of Albert's early years was his encounter with the compass. As a child, he received a small magnetic compass, an ordinary instrument, yet one that awakened an extraordinary fascination. He was captivated by the invisible force that directed the needle unerringly toward the north. How could something unseen exert such influence over the physical world? This small object became a profound symbol for the young thinker, a tangible reminder that there was more to the universe than could be immediately perceived. It hinted at unseen laws, hidden structures, and guiding principles that would later dominate his scientific explorations. At home, discussions were often quiet, filled with subtle encouragement rather than overt instruction. Herman and Pauline fostered an environment in which curiosity was honored, where questions were welcomed, and where the mysteries of the world were to be explored with patience and thoughtfulness. This gentle nurturing shaped Albert's approach to knowledge. He learned that understanding was not a destination to be reached in haste, but a slow unfolding, a delicate process of discovery that required attention, reflection, and the willingness to embrace complexity without fear. Early reading played a significant role in shaping Albert's imaginative faculties. He was particularly drawn to books that described the natural world and the fundamental questions of existence. From these texts, he absorbed not only facts, but also a sense of wonder, the feeling that the universe was a vast, intricate tapestry, waiting to be gently unraveled by patient inquiry. Stories of scientific discovery, of explorers charting unknown territories, resonated deeply with him, inspiring a vision of his own journey through the realms of thought and experimentation. Even in the challenges and setbacks of early education, Albert displayed a persistent, quiet determination. When conventional methods failed to capture his interest or when authority seemed restrictive, he did not rebel loudly, but instead turned inward, cultivating a private garden of ideas, hypotheses, and contemplations. This inner life, rich and self-sustaining, became the foundation for his later capacity to work independently, to imagine novel concepts, and to explore realms of thought untouched by the common experience of his contemporaries. As the seasons turned in Munich, the young Albert continued to develop both intellectual and personal resilience. He was growing not only in knowledge but also in the subtle art of attention, the capacity to notice what others overlooked, to linger over small details, and to recognize patterns invisible to casual observation. These early skills, cultivated in quiet moments, were laying the groundwork for a lifetime of discovery, for insights that would one day transform humanity's understanding of space, time, and reality itself. In these early years, Albert's life was a tapestry of quiet wonder, gentle observation, and unfolding curiosity. Every object, every sound, every fleeting shadow held the potential for insight. In the ordinary rhythm of family life, in the modest corridors of school, and in the serene intimacy of private reflection, the seeds of genius were being sown. They were nurtured not by urgency or acclaim, but by the slow, steady rhythm of thought and imagination, by the patient attention to detail, and by a profound willingness to ask questions that others did not yet know how to ask. And so in the softly lit streets of Ulm and Munich, in the modest rooms filled with the hum of everyday life, Albert Einstein began his journey, not as a prodigy announced with fanfare, but as a quietly observant child, gently drawn to the mysteries of the universe, preparing in the slow unfolding of time for the discoveries that would one day change the world. As Albert Einstein's years in Munich progressed, the rhythm of his daily life became intertwined with the structured cadence of school. The classrooms, with their polished floors and orderly rows of desks, held a world both familiar and strange. To many children, these spaces were simply places of instruction, a realm of memorization and repetition, For Albert, however, they were windows into a larger landscape of understanding, a territory where curiosity could stretch its quiet wings even if it sometimes collided with the rigid expectations of teachers. From the beginning, the young student experienced the dual nature of education, a mixture of fascination and frustration. Certain subjects, particularly mathematics and science, sparked a sense of deep engagement. He delighted in the clarity of numbers, the elegance of geometric relationships, and the precise logic that governed mathematical structures. The patterns and symmetries in numbers felt like familiar companions, a comforting order within which he could quietly explore. Yet in subjects like history or rote memorization of facts, Albert often felt constrained, his mind wandering beyond the confines of the text toward the underlying principles that made knowledge coherent. One of the earliest challenges he faced was adapting to the formal teaching methods, which often valued repetition over understanding. Albert would sometimes fall behind in classes where rote learning was emphasized, not because he lacked intellect, but because his mind sought meaning rather than mere recitation. Teachers, noticing his unconventional approach, occasionally viewed him as slow or inattentive. Yet beneath this perception was a profound, patient engagement with ideas. Albert preferred to delve deeply into a concept until it revealed its internal logic, rather than moving quickly through a curriculum that felt superficial to him. Outside the strictures of the classroom, Albert's intellectual curiosity found fertile ground. He developed an early fascination with physics, not merely as a collection of facts, but as a lens through which to perceive the world's hidden structures. He devoured books that introduced concepts of electricity, magnetism, and mechanics, imagining experiments and conducting thought exercises in the quiet of his home. His mind, like a delicate instrument, tuned itself to the rhythms of natural law. A spinning top, a swinging pendulum, or the simple movement of a ball down an inclined plane were not mere toys or pastimes. They were invitations to explore cause, effect, and the invisible forces at play. At home, Albert's father and mother continued to nurture his explorations. Hermann's work in electrical engineering offered Albert glimpses of the practical applications of physics. He observed wires, magnets, and motors with both care and wonder, noting the subtle interplay of forces. Pauline, with her sensitivity to the arts, encouraged Albert to maintain his connection to music and imagination. These dual influences, practical reasoning and aesthetic appreciation, provided a balanced environment, fostering both the analytical and the intuitive faculties that would become essential in his later theoretical work. Music remained a persistent companion throughout these formative years. Albert was drawn to the violin, finding in its melodies a reflective space where the mind could wander freely. As he practiced, he noticed patterns in sound, harmonies and counterpoints that mirrored the symmetries and balances he admired in mathematics. Music became more than recreation. It was a meditation, a subtle rehearsal for the kind of abstract, imaginative thinking required in physics. The slow, deliberate movements of fingers over strings paralleled the careful operations of his mind, each note a gentle exploration of relationships, sequences, and timing. During adolescence, Albert began to encounter ideas that would challenge his understanding of the world and propel him toward profound insights. He read books by notable scientists, encountering the work of Newton and Faraday, learning about the predictable motions of planets and the mysterious behavior of electricity and magnetism. These readings were not passive. Albert's mind engaged actively with the concepts, often reimagining experiments in his imagination, questioning assumptions, and testing ideas through visualization and reasoning. This ability to conduct experiments mentally, a skill less common than actual laboratory practice, allowed him to explore possibilities without the limitations of material constraints. Socially, Albert's demeanor remained gentle and reflective. He was not one to seek prominence in groups, preferring instead to observe, listen, and ponder. Friends who shared his intellectual interests sometimes formed quiet bonds, but even in companionship, Albert often retreated into private reflection. The world seemed to him full of patterns waiting to be discovered, whether in nature, in mathematics, or in human behavior. His solitary habits were not signs of isolation, but a natural alignment with the pace at which he needed to understand, absorb, and integrate knowledge. It was during these years that Albert's fascination with geometry and the principles of space deepened. He delighted in imagining lines and planes extending infinitely, curves bending in ways that defied simple observation, and angles intersecting in intricate formations. Geometry offered him a framework to think spatially, to visualize relationships beyond immediate perception, and to consider how abstract principles could explain tangible phenomena. This spatial imagination, nurtured in childhood and adolescence, would later be indispensable in the development of his theories of relativity, where understanding the curvature of space and the flow of time required an ability to envision realities beyond the visible. Albert also began to explore philosophy, particularly the writings of thinkers who pondered the nature of knowledge and perception. Questions arose in his mind that would echo throughout his life. What is the nature of reality? How do we know what is true? Can unseen forces govern the physical world, and if so, how do we perceive them? These contemplations, gentle yet insistent, shaped his approach to science. He learned to value intuition and reason, to balance observation with imagination, and to appreciate the subtleties that lay hidden beneath surface appearances. In school, Albert's independent streak sometimes brought him into subtle conflict with authority. He was respectful, but unyielding in his pursuit of understanding. When a teacher presented an idea that seemed incomplete or inconsistent, he quietly questioned it, seeking coherence rather than confrontation. This intellectual independence, though occasionally misunderstood, was an essential part of his development. It cultivated resilience, patience, and the ability to think beyond conventional frameworks, qualities that would later allow him to challenge established notions of space, time, and energy without fear. By his mid-teens, Albert's intellectual horizons had expanded significantly. He had mastered foundational mathematics and developed a growing confidence in his understanding of physical principles. His notebooks, filled with calculations, sketches, and contemplations, reveal a mind actively engaged in dialogue with the universe, experimenting with possibilities, testing assumptions, and imagining outcomes. Even as he navigated the structured environment of school, his inner life was rich with inquiry, quietly preparing him for the groundbreaking work that lay ahead. A particularly formative influence during these years was his exposure to thought experiments. Albert discovered that the mind itself could serve as a laboratory, where scenarios could be imagined, manipulated, and analyzed without physical tools. Whether visualizing chasing a beam of light or imagining falling freely in a gravitational field, these mental exercises strengthened his ability to conceptualize abstract principles. This capacity to think beyond the immediately observable was unusual, even among gifted students, and would later become a hallmark of his scientific methodology. In the quiet of his adolescent room, surrounded by books and musical instruments, Albert often pondered the universe's mysteries. He marveled at the consistency of natural laws, the way the physical world conformed to principles that seemed both simple and profound. He began to sense an underlying unity, a hidden order that tied together disparate phenomena. This sense of coherence, a gentle yet persistent intuition, guided his studies, fostering both patience and wonder. It was not a rush toward achievement, but a steady, deliberate journey toward understanding, marked by curiosity, reflection, and an attentive awareness of the world. Albert's adolescence, though marked by the normal rhythms of schooling, friendships, and family life, was thus deeply shaped by an intellectual awakening. It was a period of quiet expansion in which the foundations of mathematics, physics, and philosophical reflection came together in a meditative rhythm of thought. The patterns he observed in numbers, forms, sounds, and behaviors converged into an emerging vision of the universe as an ordered, intelligible system, a vision that would guide him through the challenges and discoveries of his later life. By the time Albert approached the threshold of higher education, he had already cultivated a distinct approach to understanding the world, one that combined meticulous observation, patient reflection, imaginative visualization, and an unwavering commitment to coherence. These qualities, nurtured in the gentle crucible of his formative years, would become the instruments of his genius. They would allow him to explore questions that had long eluded the greatest minds, to conceive of the strange yet elegant relationships that underpin space, time, and energy, and to leave a mark on the scientific world that remains profound to this day. As the teenage Albert Einstein approached adulthood, the rhythms of his life began to shift toward new horizons shaped by both aspiration and uncertainty. The quiet streets of Munich and the familiar contours of his home had nurtured his early curiosity, yet the broader world of higher learning beckoned with promises of knowledge, intellectual freedom, and new challenges. It was a period marked by anticipation and introspection, a threshold between the sheltered world of adolescence and the vast possibilities of scientific inquiry. In 1895, at the age of 16, Albert made a bold step. He attempted to enter the Swiss Federal Polytechnic School in Zurich, known as the Eidgenössische Technische Hochschule. It was a prestigious institution, celebrated for its rigorous instruction in mathematics, physics, and engineering. The Polytechnic represented both opportunity and trial, a place where the young thinker's abilities and temperament would be tested. Yet the initial attempt was not without difficulty. The entrance examination revealed gaps in his formal preparation, particularly in areas such as language and general knowledge, even though his grasp of mathematics and physics was extraordinary. This early setback, though humbling, did not diminish his resolve. Albert's response was not to retreat but to redirect, seeking ways to strengthen his foundation while maintaining his dedication to the subjects that most captivated him. The following year, Albert enrolled in the Cantonal School in Aarau, a progressive institution with an educational philosophy that emphasized understanding over memorization. Here, the young scholar found a gentler rhythm that resonated with his intellectual temperament. Teachers encouraged critical thinking, experimentation, and independent exploration. In this environment, Albert thrived, engaging with subjects that had once seemed constrained by rigid methods. He developed a deeper appreciation for conceptual clarity and the importance of questioning assumptions, qualities that would later define his scientific style. The serene classrooms and open intellectual spaces of Aarau allowed him to cultivate habits of thought that extended beyond textbooks, nurturing both curiosity and patience. During this period, Albert began to formulate the early contours of the questions that would later occupy his adult life. He reflected on the nature of light, motion, and time, pondering the paradoxes and patterns that seemed to govern their behavior. He conducted thought experiments with quiet intensity, imagining scenarios in which he could test the principles of physics without relying on physical apparatus. For instance, he would visualize himself moving alongside a beam of light, considering what he might observe, how time and distance would appear, and what this implied about the very nature of reality. These exercises, performed in solitude yet with vivid detail, honed his ability to navigate abstract concepts with both precision and imagination. By 1896, Albert was ready to return to the Polytechnic in Zurich, now better prepared and deeply motivated. His enrollment marked the beginning of a formative period of higher learning, one in which he would immerse himself in the study of mathematics, theoretical physics, and applied mechanics. The Polytechnic, with its lectures, laboratories, and peer discussions, offered a rigorous training ground. Yet Albert's approach remained distinctive. He was less concerned with rote completion of assignments and more absorbed in understanding the underlying principles, exploring the elegant connections that unified seemingly disparate phenomena. While classmates often focused on immediate performance, Albert pursued the deeper coherence of ideas, quietly constructing the mental scaffolding that would support his future breakthroughs. The years at the Polytechnic also offered opportunities for intellectual companionship and mentorship. He developed friendships with students who shared his curiosity, engaging in long discussions that ranged from abstract mathematics to the philosophical foundations of physics. These interactions, though understated, provided a sounding board for his thoughts, a space to articulate ideas, test assumptions, and refine his reasoning. Certain professors, recognizing his unusual insight, encouraged his explorations, providing guidance while allowing him the independence that suited his temperament. The environment, balancing structure with intellectual freedom, became a crucible in which his analytical and imaginative faculties were shaped in tandem. Simultaneously, Albert's inner world continued to expand. Music remained a constant presence, offering solace in a form of meditation. He played the violin with quiet dedication, allowing melodies to accompany the unfolding of abstract thought. In these moments, the gentle rhythms of music intertwined with the intellectual patterns he observed in mathematics and physics, fostering a sense of harmony between intuition and logic. This synthesis of art and science, cultivated over many years, would later inform not only his methods of discovery, but also his ability to communicate complex ideas with clarity and elegance. Upon completing his studies, Albert faced a new challenge: finding meaningful employment in a world that did not always appreciate unconventional talent. Despite his exceptional abilities, his unorthodox approach and preference for independent inquiry made securing academic positions difficult. He applied for several posts in universities and research institutions, only to encounter rejection or uncertainty. These years, though quiet and often solitary, were not idle. Albert continued to study, read voraciously, and engage in thought experiments. He refined his understanding of electrodynamics, thermodynamics, and statistical mechanics, patiently preparing for the moment when his insights would coalesce into transformative ideas. In 1902, a small yet significant opportunity arose. Albert secured a position at the Swiss Patent Office in Bern. Though seemingly mundane, the work of examining patent applications allowed him to exercise critical thinking, logical analysis, and attention to detail. Each invention presented a puzzle to be understood, a problem requiring careful evaluation of principles and feasibility. This period of professional life, though modest in outward prestige, provided a unique space for reflection and experimentation. Albert's daily routine, structured yet accommodating of mental wandering, became a fertile environment for intellectual cultivation. The quiet hours at the patent office offered him the stability to develop his theories, observe the consistency of natural laws, and conduct mental experiments with serene concentration. During this time, he continued to immerse himself in the scientific literature of the day. Journals, treatises, and papers by leading physicists were read with meticulous care. Albert often questioned accepted doctrines, imagining alternative frameworks and considering implications that had not yet been explored. He was particularly intrigued by inconsistencies in the understanding of light, electromagnetism, and the nature of motion. These quiet investigations, performed alongside his routine work, laid the groundwork for the revolutionary ideas that would soon emerge. The combination of intellectual independence, disciplined reflection, and sustained curiosity characterized these formative years. Albert's life during this period was neither dramatic nor sensational. Rather, it was steady, deliberate, and contemplative. Each thought experiment, each careful calculation, each patient observation built upon the last, creating a lattice of understanding that would support his most profound discoveries. The gentle rhythm of daily work, the quiet companionship of music, and the persistent inquiry into nature's principles fostered a mind capable of perceiving patterns and connections invisible to most observers. In retrospect, these early adult years reveal a remarkable alignment of circumstance and temperament. Albert's challenges, academic setbacks, professional obstacles, and the solitude of independent study were met with patient curiosity rather than frustration. His environment, though modest, nurtured reflection, and his mind, disciplined yet imaginative, prepared for insights that would fundamentally alter humanity's understanding of the universe. In the quiet of study rooms, offices, and the spaces of his own imagination, Albert Einstein was quietly assembling the foundations of his genius, guided by the steady rhythm of inquiry, intuition, and intellectual courage. By the end of this period, Albert was poised on the brink of his first major contributions to science. The insights nurtured in quiet observation, the thought experiments refined over years of patient reflection, and the intellectual independence cultivated amidst both challenge and opportunity were converging toward a transformative moment. Though the world had yet to recognize the extent of his potential, Albert Einstein's journey through higher learning and early professional life had prepared him for the profound breakthroughs that would soon define his legacy. The year was 1905, a year that would quietly yet profoundly reshape the landscape of physics and mark the emergence of a new voice in scientific thought. Albert Einstein, now in his mid-20s, was employed at the Swiss Patent Office in Bern, a position seemingly mundane yet perfectly suited to the cultivation of an independent, contemplative mind. Each day, he reviewed technical documents, assessed inventions, and scrutinized the practical applications of ideas. Though the work itself was routine, it offered an unexpected gift: uninterrupted time for reflection, the mental space to explore questions far beyond the constraints of ordinary observation. In the calm of his office, Albert pursued the lines of thought that had occupied him for years. Light, motion, and time, subjects that had fascinated him since childhood, remained central to his contemplations. He revisited the paradoxes of Newtonian mechanics, the behavior of electromagnetic fields, and the emerging questions surrounding thermodynamics. In the quiet hours, he conducted thought experiments that pushed the boundaries of conventional understanding. He imagined moving alongside a beam of light, questioning the constancy of time, and visualizing the implications of energy and matter in forms yet unconsidered. These reflections, subtle and deliberate, were not fleeting curiosities but the seeds of profound theoretical insight. During this period, Albert began to write and circulate a series of papers that would later become legendary. Each was composed with meticulous care, reflecting both the precision of logic and the expansiveness of imagination. In these papers, he tackled problems that had long perplexed the scientific community. One explored the nature of light and the emission of energy, proposing the revolutionary idea that light itself could be understood as discrete quanta, packets of energy, now known as photons. This notion challenged the prevailing wave theory of light, suggesting instead a duality that encompassed both particle and wave properties. It was a subtle yet radical shift, quietly questioning assumptions that had been long accepted. Another paper examined the behavior of atoms in motion, applying statistical methods to explain phenomena such as Brownian movement, the erratic, jittering motion of particles suspended in fluids. By connecting observable behavior with theoretical predictions, Albert provided empirical support for the existence of atoms, which at the time remained a topic of debate. The work was a careful weaving of observation, mathematics, and imaginative reasoning, revealing an extraordinary capacity to link the minute and the abstract. Yet the most transformative of these writings was the one that would later be recognized as the foundation of the special theory of relativity. In this work, Albert considered the implications of two principles: the constancy of the speed of light for all observers, and the universality of physical laws in all inertial frames of reference. From these modest assumptions, he deduced profound consequences: the relativity of simultaneity, the dependence of time and length on relative motion, and the unification of space and time into a four-dimensional continuum. The paper, though initially technical and precise, carried within it the seeds of a revolution in understanding the very fabric of the universe. In 1905, often referred to as Einstein's Annus Mirabilis, or Miracle Year, these four papers on the photoelectric effect, Brownian motion, special relativity, and mass energy equivalence emerged quietly, published in the Annalen der Physik, a respected scientific journal. The scientific world at the time did not immediately grasp the magnitude of their implications. Albert's approach was understated, almost meditative. He did not seek fame, but understanding. His insights were offered not as proclamations, but as careful explorations, the gentle illumination of previously unseen structures in the natural world. What is remarkable about this period is the serenity with which Albert approached his discoveries. There were no grand declarations, no dramatic gestures of triumph. Instead, there was a slow, methodical unfolding of ideas, each built upon years of quiet reflection, meticulous calculation, and imaginative experimentation in thought. The mental discipline he had cultivated during his youth and early adult life, his careful attention to patterns, his patience, his comfort with abstraction, allowed him to perceive truths that eluded even the most diligent contemporaries. The publication of these papers did not merely address existing questions, they created new avenues of inquiry. The notion that energy and mass were interchangeable, encapsulated in the iconic equation E mc2, suggested that matter itself held within it a latent, almost imperceptible energy. This concept, so elegantly simple in its expression, would later become foundational not only for physics but for understanding the fundamental processes of the cosmos. Similarly, the idea that measurements of space and time were not absolute, but dependent on the observer's frame of reference, required a subtle shift in perspective, a quiet reorientation of thought that demanded both intellectual rigor and imaginative openness. During this remarkable period, Albert's life remained modest. The world outside his study continued in ordinary rhythms, the streets of Baron unchanged, the hum of everyday life uninterrupted. Yet within the quiet of his mind, the universe was expanding, revealing patterns and principles that had previously gone unnoticed. His approach combined rigorous logic with a gentle, reflective curiosity, allowing him to explore profound questions without the urgency of external expectation. This balance, discipline paired with imaginative freedom, was central to the elegance and clarity of his work. It is worth noting the subtlety with which Albert's discoveries influenced those around him. While he did not seek immediate recognition, the significance of his papers gradually became evident to the scientific community. Colleagues and mentors began to correspond with him, seeking clarification, discussion, and collaboration. These interactions were understated, reflective, and respectful, mirroring the calm, deliberate manner in which Albert himself approached inquiry. His ideas, once gently introduced, began to ripple outward, prompting reconsideration of long-held assumptions and the gradual reshaping of contemporary physics. The thoughtfulness of Albert's approach extended beyond the technical content of his work. In every exploration, there was a sensitivity to conceptual coherence, an insistence that ideas not only be logically consistent, but also harmoniously integrated with empirical evidence. He pursued understanding as a meditative act, a careful weaving together of observation, mathematics, and imagination. Each paper, each calculation, each reflection was part of a continuum, a patient unfolding of thought that balanced the seen with the unseen, the known with the hypothesized. Even as his ideas began to gain recognition, Albert remained grounded in the quiet routines of life. Music, reading, and contemplative walks continued to offer both inspiration and solace. He often reflected on the beauty inherent in natural law, the subtle interplay of forces, and the deep patterns connecting all phenomena. This ongoing meditation on the world around him reinforced both the intellectual and emotional dimensions of his work, shaping not only his theories but his approach to understanding and appreciating the universe. In this way, 1905 stands as a testament to the power of focused, patient, and reflective thought. Albert Einstein, through the quiet diligence of years spent observing, imagining, and reasoning, produced insights that would fundamentally alter humanity's conception of reality. There were no loud proclamations, no public spectacle, only the steady emergence of understanding, a gentle illumination of truths previously hidden. The year marked the culmination of his formative development and the beginning of a new era, one in which the subtle and profound principles of physics would be reimagined. As the world slowly began to grasp the implications of Albert's work, the stage was set for further exploration. Questions remained unanswered, challenges lay ahead, and the true depth of the changes he had introduced was only beginning to be understood. Yet, within the quiet confidence of his own mind, Albert continued to observe, reflect, and imagine, guided by the principles that had nurtured his intellect since childhood: curiosity, patience, and a profound attentiveness to the patterns of the universe. The dawn of this period, marked by the birth of revolutionary thought, exemplifies the gentle yet persistent unfolding of genius. It demonstrates how years of steady reflective inquiry, nurtured in quiet environments and guided by disciplined imagination, can yield insights that transform understanding. Albert Einstein, in the stillness of his study, quietly redefined the very nature of reality, offering the world a vision that was as elegant as it was profound. Following the publication of his remarkable papers in 1905, Albert Einstein entered a period of gradual but growing recognition. Though the world had yet to fully comprehend the breadth and depth of his insights, those within the scientific community began to take notice. Colleagues in physics, intrigued and occasionally puzzled by the originality of his work, initiated correspondence, asking questions, clarifying points, and offering perspectives. These interactions, though understated, provided both validation and intellectual stimulation, gently affirming that the path he had chosen, marked by reflection, imagination, and independence, was aligned with the frontiers of knowledge. The recognition Albert received was initially modest. Letters arrived from fellow scientists expressing cautious curiosity, occasionally tinged with skepticism. After all, his conclusions challenged deeply ingrained notions. The absolutes of time and space were called into question, and the nature of light itself was reconsidered. Such ideas demanded a subtle courage, not only on the part of the thinker proposing them, but also of those willing to entertain them. Albert's work required a careful, reflective engagement, an openness to complexity and nuance that unfolded slowly in the minds of readers. In Bern, Einstein's professional life continued at the patent office, its quiet routines providing the stable environment he had grown to value. The office, far from being a distraction, became a sanctuary for thought. Each patent application presented an opportunity to engage with practical innovation, to consider the principles underlying mechanical devices and their potential impact. In examining inventions, Albert honed his ability to analyze structures systematically, a skill that complemented the abstract thinking required for theoretical physics. This dual focus, applied reasoning by day, imaginative theorizing by night, fostered a balance between the practical and the conceptual, allowing insights to mature in a calm, deliberate manner. During these years, Albert's social and personal life reflected a quiet consistency. He maintained friendships with individuals who shared his intellectual curiosity, enjoying long discussions that meandered across mathematics, philosophy, and the nature of the universe. Music remained a meditative companion. The violin, played in solitary reflection or in informal gatherings, offered a rhythm that paralleled the unfolding patterns he discerned in science. In these moments, Einstein's mind could wander freely, weaving together abstract principles, empirical observation, and aesthetic sensibility, a combination that nurtured both creativity and clarity. As his ideas began to circulate more broadly, Albert was invited to give lectures and attend meetings, gradually transitioning from the seclusion of the patent office to the broader stage of academic engagement. Yet he approached these invitations with characteristic calm and deliberate attention. Rather than seeking acclaim, he valued clarity of understanding and the opportunity to test his ideas through thoughtful dialogue. His lectures, marked by quiet authority and gentle articulation, invited listeners to consider perspectives they might not have encountered, encouraging reflection rather than immediate judgment. The scientific community's response to Einstein's work was a blend of admiration, skepticism, and cautious curiosity. Many scholars recognized the elegance and coherence of his reasoning, yet some found it difficult to reconcile with established frameworks. The challenge for Einstein was not merely to prove the correctness of his theories, but to guide others in seeing the subtle shifts of perspective his work required. In doing so, he relied on patience and careful explanation, avoiding confrontation and allowing the clarity of ideas to gradually reveal their significance. In parallel, Albert's personal reflections deepened. He considered not only the mechanics of the universe but the philosophical implications of his discoveries. Questions about the nature of reality, perception, and human understanding occupied his thoughts, often in quiet moments of contemplation. He pondered the interconnection of space, time, and energy, reflecting on how these elements revealed a hidden order that was both elegant and profoundly subtle. These reflections were not intended for immediate publication. Rather, they were part of the ongoing cultivation of insight, a patient dialogue between observation, imagination, and reason. It was during this period that Einstein began to navigate the practical realities of establishing a more formal academic presence. His reputation growing slowly, he applied for teaching positions, initially facing the common obstacles of an unconventional career trajectory. Universities, cautious of his independent approach and lack of traditional credentials, sometimes hesitated to offer opportunities. Yet, Albert's quiet persistence, combined with the growing acknowledgement of his contributions, eventually led to positions that allowed him to balance teaching with continued research. In these roles, he nurtured a new generation of students, encouraging curiosity, rigorous thought, and the patient exploration of fundamental principles. The years following the Annus Mirabilis were also a time of personal adaptation. Einstein's life remained modest, his routines deliberate, his social circle selective. These qualities provided stability, allowing him to maintain the focus necessary for sustained intellectual work. He continued to play the violin, read extensively, and walk in contemplation, finding in these simple activities the mental space to process complex concepts. The balance of inner life and external responsibilities exemplified the subtle rhythm that characterized much of his work. Deliberate, reflective, and attentive to the nuanced interplay of thought and experience. As recognition increased, Albert's influence began to extend beyond the immediate circle of physicists. Scholars from related disciplines, philosophers, and even policymakers gradually became aware of his work. The principles he had introduced, the relativity of space and time, the quantization of light, and the subtle interplay of mass and energy, were slowly integrated into the broader discourse, prompting reconsideration of both scientific and philosophical frameworks. Yet Einstein's approach remained unhurried. He did not demand rapid acceptance. Instead, he relied on the clarity, coherence, and consistency of his ideas to gently unfold their significance over time. This period also revealed the subtle interplay between challenge and growth. Albert's independent thinking sometimes drew scrutiny or misunderstanding, yet these experiences reinforced his intellectual resilience. He learned to communicate complex ideas patiently, to anticipate questions and doubts, and to refine his reasoning without sacrificing the elegance or simplicity of his insights. These skills, cultivated in quiet reflection and careful dialogue, became as integral to his influence as the theoretical work itself. By the end of these years, Albert Einstein had achieved a delicate balance. Recognition was growing, yet his intellectual independence remained intact. He had transitioned from the solitary reflection of the patent office to a broader engagement with the scientific community, all while maintaining the meditative approach that had nurtured his greatest insights. The stage was set for further exploration, deeper inquiry, and the expansion of his revolutionary ideas into new realms of physics. In this calm, reflective progression, one sees a model of how quiet dedication, intellectual patience, and thoughtful engagement can lead to profound impact. Albert Einstein's approach was neither dramatic nor hurried. It was deliberate, measured, and attentive to the subtle interplay between discovery and understanding. Each paper, lecture, and correspondence became a step in the unfolding journey, a gentle advancement toward a more complete comprehension of the universe and the human mind's capacity to perceive it. The quiet accumulation of recognition and experience during this period was crucial. It allowed Einstein to refine both his scientific approach and his methods of communication, preparing him for the broader challenges and achievements that lay ahead. These years exemplify the slow, meditative rhythm of intellectual maturation, demonstrating how extraordinary insights can emerge not through haste, but through patience, reflection, and the continuous cultivation of understanding. Following the period of quiet recognition, Albert Einstein's ideas began to attract more sustained attention from the scientific community. The subtleties of his theories, the relativity of space and time, the dual nature of light, and the interrelation of mass and energy, gradually became topics of serious discussion and careful examination. Scientists, initially intrigued yet cautious, began to test, debate, and analyze the implications of his work, slowly uncovering the depth and precision behind his quiet reasoning. By the early 1910s, Einstein had begun to secure more formal academic positions. He held temporary teaching appointments in Prague, and later returned to the Swiss Polytechnic as a lecturer. These roles provided a structured framework for his continued research while offering opportunities to influence young physicists with his reflective, patient approach. Einstein's lectures were not simply recitations of accepted knowledge. They were invitations to observe, question, and understand, Students often remarked on the meditative clarity of his presentations, the way he guided them through complex ideas with calm deliberation, allowing insights to unfold gently rather than demanding immediate comprehension. During these years, Einstein's focus gradually expanded beyond special relativity to consider the effects of gravitation on space and time. He began to investigate what would later be known as the general theory of relativity, a more comprehensive framework that sought to describe how mass and energy could influence the very geometry of space-time. These investigations required prolonged periods of mental concentration, careful calculation, and imaginative visualization. Einstein's approach was deeply contemplative. He would often spend long hours walking, thinking, or quietly sketching mathematical relationships, allowing ideas to mature in a slow, deliberate rhythm. The development of general relativity was not merely an intellectual exercise. It represented a subtle but profound shift in how the universe was understood. In proposing that gravity was not a force acting at a distance but a curvature of space-time caused by mass, Einstein asked the scientific world to consider a framework that was both conceptually elegant and empirically verifiable. The theory demanded patience, reflection, and a willingness to suspend preconceptions, inviting both scientists and observers to see the cosmos in a fundamentally new way. Einstein's publications during this period continued to balance rigorous mathematics with accessible conceptual explanations. He was deeply aware that revolutionary ideas required careful communication. Clarity was as important as correctness. His writing and lectures displayed a quiet authority, conveying both precision and humility. The theories were presented not as absolute dogmas but as carefully reasoned constructs, open to refinement, testing, and further exploration. This approach reflected Einstein's own meditative engagement with science, an understanding that discovery is a gradual process, one that deepens through observation, analysis, and dialogue. In 1915, after years of meticulous work, Einstein presented the completed general theory of relativity to the Prussian Academy of Sciences in Berlin. The theory described how massive objects caused curvature in space-time, resulting in phenomena such as the bending of light around stars and the precise motions of planets. It offered not only elegant explanations for previously observed anomalies, such as the precession of Mercury's orbit, but also bold predictions that could be tested through careful observation. The moment was the culmination of a decade of reflective inquiry, illustrating how patient, contemplative thought could yield transformative insight into the fundamental structure of the universe. The scientific community responded with a combination of fascination and skepticism. While some immediately recognized the elegance and potential of Einstein's framework, others hesitated, requiring empirical validation. The opportunity for such validation came in 1919, when a total solar eclipse provided the rare alignment necessary to test the prediction that light from distant stars would bend when passing near the sun. Observations conducted during the eclipse confirmed Einstein's predictions with remarkable precision. The result brought widespread attention to his work, transforming him from a quietly respected theorist into an internationally recognized figure. Despite this newfound prominence, Einstein maintained a characteristic calm and reflective demeanor. He did not seek fame for its own sake. His satisfaction lay in understanding and the unfolding of knowledge. Interviews, invitations, and public attention were met with the same deliberate patience he had cultivated throughout his career. Even as newspapers and popular culture celebrated his achievements, he remained focused on ongoing research, considering the next questions, refining theories, and exploring subtleties that others might overlook. During this period, Einstein also began to engage more actively with the philosophical dimensions of science. He pondered the nature of reality, causality, and the limits of human understanding, reflecting on the interplay between observation and theory. His work inspired discussions not only in physics but in broader intellectual circles as scholars, writers, and thinkers considered the implications of a universe in which space and time were dynamic, relative, and intertwined. These reflections deepened the contemplative aspect of his scientific practice, reinforcing his understanding that discovery was as much about perception and interpretation as it was about equations and predictions. Einstein's influence extended into educational and institutional contexts as well. As he assumed professorships at universities in Zurich and Berlin, he mentored a generation of students who were drawn to both the intellectual rigor and the reflective elegance of his approach. He encouraged independent thinking, careful observation, and the patient integration of ideas, fostering a culture of inquiry that valued subtlety, creativity, and critical reflection. These pedagogical practices, though understated, helped to shape the scientific landscape for decades, extending the impact of his work beyond immediate research outcomes. In addition to his scientific endeavors, Einstein became increasingly aware of the social and political dimensions of intellectual life. Though his work was focused on the natural world, he recognized the broader implications of knowledge and inquiry for society. His quiet engagement with issues of ethics, human understanding, and the responsibilities of scientists reflected a thoughtful awareness that discovery exists not in isolation, but within a larger human context. These reflections did not disrupt his scientific practice. Rather, they complemented it, nurturing a holistic perspective that balanced intellect, imagination, and conscientiousness. By the end of this period, Albert Einstein had emerged not only as a transformative figure in physics, but also as a model of thoughtful, meditative engagement with the world. His approach combined rigorous analysis, imaginative exploration, and patient reflection, demonstrating that extraordinary insight often arises from quiet, sustained attention rather than dramatic intervention. The confirmation of general relativity, the growing recognition within the scientific community, and the careful cultivation of intellectual and ethical awareness marked a subtle but profound evolution in both his work and his influence. In this phase of life, one can observe the slow, deliberate expansion of Einstein's presence. From a quiet thinker at the patent office to a central figure in theoretical physics, the journey reflects the interplay between reflection and recognition, between patient inquiry and empirical validation. Albert's life during these years exemplifies the power of sustained, meditative engagement, an approach that transforms curiosity into understanding, thought into discovery, and subtle insight into enduring influence. As the 1920s unfolded, Albert Einstein's life entered a period of expanding horizons, both intellectually and socially. The world he had long observed with quiet reflection now began to observe him in return. No longer confined to the serene routine of offices or lecture halls, he found himself at the intersection of groundbreaking science, international recognition, and the broader currents of society. Yet even amid this growing visibility, Einstein maintained the calm, meditative approach that had defined his work from childhood. Each thought, each interaction, and each lecture was approached with deliberate care, allowing insight to unfold gently rather than through urgency or spectacle. During this decade, Einstein continued to probe the frontiers of theoretical physics. While general relativity had established his reputation, he was keenly aware of the unanswered questions that still lingered. He turned his attention to the unification of forces, attempting to reconcile gravity with electromagnetism in a coherent theoretical framework. These pursuits required extraordinary patience and subtle reasoning, as he navigated complex mathematical structures and conceptual challenges. The process was methodical, contemplative, and at times solitary, an extension of the quiet intellectual discipline cultivated over decades. Einstein's curiosity was not limited to abstract mathematics and theoretical constructs. He remained deeply interested in the empirical foundations of physics, collaborating with colleagues and following observational results with careful attention. The bending of starlight around the sun, the precise behavior of planetary orbits, and the properties of light and radiation were all subjects he studied with meticulous care. Though the world increasingly celebrated his public persona, his primary engagement remained with understanding the delicate interplay of forces and structures that governed the universe. The 1920s also marked a period of extraordinary global recognition. Einstein traveled to lecture in Europe, North America, and beyond, sharing his ideas with fellow scientists, students, and curious observers. Audiences were often captivated not merely by the content of his talks, but by the serene confidence and clarity with which he presented complex concepts. His approach invited reflection rather than rapid comprehension, encouraging listeners to engage deeply with ideas rather than to seek immediate answers. In this way, Einstein cultivated not only understanding but also a form of intellectual patience, inviting the world to see through the lens of careful, reflective inquiry. Amid these professional and public activities, Einstein's personal life remained intertwined with the rhythms of thought and contemplation. Music continued to offer solace and a subtle framework for reflection. Long walks, quiet conversations with friends and colleagues, and periods of private study provided the necessary balance to the increasing demands of visibility. These habits, cultivated over years of deliberate attention to intellectual and personal well-being, allowed him to maintain a steady rhythm in thought and creativity, despite the pressures of fame and travel. During this period, Einstein's contributions to quantum theory gained increasing attention. He continued to explore the dual nature of light and the implications of energy quantization, applying his mind to phenomena that challenged classical understanding. Though the broader physics community was still grappling with the full implications of quantum mechanics, Einstein's reflections provided critical insights, guiding subsequent generations of physicists. His work exemplified a quiet rigor, precise calculations, careful consideration of experimental results, and the imaginative leap necessary to see beyond conventional assumptions. The decade was also marked by Einstein's engagement with philosophical and ethical considerations. He reflected on the responsibilities of scientists, the social implications of discovery, and the broader questions of human understanding. His writings and speeches conveyed a gentle but persistent message. Knowledge carries responsibility, and insight should be pursued with integrity, humility, and awareness of its potential impact on society. These reflections were neither loud nor polemical. They were considered meditations, offering guidance without imposing urgency, inviting reflection rather than reaction. Einstein's growing prominence also allowed him to influence education and intellectual culture. He continued to mentor students, collaborate with colleagues, and participate in scientific societies, always emphasizing clarity of thought, precision of reasoning, and the careful integration of theory and observation. His guidance was subtle but effective. He encouraged independent thinking, patience in inquiry, and a reflective approach to both problem-solving and the broader questions of meaning inherent in scientific exploration. Travel during this period provided not only opportunities for dissemination of ideas, but also moments of quiet reflection. While lecturing in distant cities, observing new landscapes, and engaging with diverse intellectual communities, Einstein often considered the universality of natural laws and the subtle patterns that connected phenomena across space and time. These observations reinforced his sense of interconnectedness, both within physics and within the broader human endeavor of understanding. His perspective remained contemplative. Discovery was a process of alignment with underlying order, not a race to assertion or acclaim. Despite the accolades and international attention, Einstein remained deeply committed to the ongoing exploration of theoretical physics. He pursued unification theories, delved into the mathematics of curved spacetime, and continued to examine the subtle mysteries of light and energy. His approach exemplified the meditative rhythm that had characterized his entire life: sustained attention, careful reasoning, imaginative visualization, and the willingness to embrace complexity without haste. Each investigation built upon the previous, forming a quiet, deliberate continuum of understanding that spanned both decades and intellectual domains. In reflecting on this period, one observes the harmonious balance between public recognition and private contemplation. Einstein navigated the demands of international acclaim while maintaining the inner rhythm essential for deep intellectual work. His life illustrates the power of patience, subtle reflection, and the careful cultivation of insight, qualities that enabled him not only to generate groundbreaking discoveries, but also to communicate them with clarity, humility, and enduring influence. By the end of the 1920s, Albert Einstein had established himself as a central figure in the scientific world, yet he remained fundamentally the reflective thinker who had once quietly pursued patterns in the shadows of his childhood room. His mind, disciplined yet imaginative, continued to explore, question, and illuminate the subtle structures of reality. In the calm rhythm of thought, observation, and reflection, Einstein exemplified a model of intellectual engagement that was both profound and enduring. A gentle, persistent unfolding of understanding that continues to inspire generations of thinkers. As the 1920s progressed, Albert Einstein's life became a delicate balance of intellectual pursuit, social engagement, and personal reflection. The successes of earlier years, most notably the confirmation of general relativity and the acclaim that followed, opened doors to broader opportunities, yet they also introduced subtler challenges. While the world increasingly recognized his genius, Einstein remained deeply committed to the quiet rhythms that had guided his work: meditation, careful reasoning, and patient observation. Each day became a negotiation between the external demands of recognition and the internal cultivation of understanding. Einstein continued to pursue unresolved questions in theoretical physics, particularly the quest to unify the fundamental forces of nature. He investigated the intricate relationships between electromagnetism and gravity, exploring mathematical frameworks that could describe the universe with elegance and consistency. These endeavors demanded not only intellectual rigor, but also extraordinary patience and subtle imagination. To navigate this complexity, Einstein often turned to mental visualization, imagining the interplay of forces, the curvature of space-time, and the behavior of light and matter across scales both vast and minute. These contemplations, though abstract, were grounded in the persistent search for coherence, for patterns that revealed deeper truths beyond immediate observation. Alongside his research, Einstein engaged with the broader intellectual and social community. He corresponded extensively with fellow scientists, philosophers, and educators, exchanging ideas in a manner that was both deliberate and reflective. His letters often combined meticulous technical reasoning with philosophical inquiry, reflecting a mind that integrated knowledge and contemplation seamlessly. Colleagues frequently noted the clarity and patience evident in his communication. He encouraged dialogue without imposing conclusions, guiding thought through subtle questions rather than authoritative assertion. During these years, Einstein also became increasingly aware of the ethical dimensions of scientific discovery. The rapid advancements in physics, particularly in the realm of nuclear research, highlighted the potential consequences of knowledge applied without reflection. Einstein's reflections were contemplative rather than alarmist. He sought to understand the moral responsibilities of scientists, the implications of theoretical insights for society, and the delicate balance between curiosity and care. He advocated for thoughtful engagement, reminding both peers and the public that discovery was inseparable from ethical consideration. Einstein's personal life, though often private, continued to provide a foundation for his intellectual endeavors. Music remained a constant companion, offering both meditation and inspiration. Long walks, particularly in nature, served as moments of quiet reflection, allowing the mind to wander freely across the landscapes of thought. Friends and close colleagues became subtle mirrors for his reflections, offering dialogue, feedback, and companionship without disrupting the gentle rhythm of his intellectual life. These patterns of personal engagement reinforced the calm, deliberate approach that had nurtured his greatest insights. The period also brought challenges in navigating the expanding public dimension of his life. Einstein's fame had grown beyond academic circles, attracting attention from journalists, the general public, and cultural institutions. While he remained patient and gentle in interactions, the constant visibility sometimes necessitated careful management of time and attention. Einstein responded by maintaining structured periods for reflection and research, ensuring that the demands of social and professional engagement did not overwhelm the meditative focus essential to his work. This disciplined approach allowed him to integrate recognition into the rhythm of daily life, rather than allowing it to dictate his pace. In the realm of scientific discourse, Einstein encountered ongoing debates surrounding the interpretation of quantum mechanics. While he had contributed foundational insights to the emerging theory, he remained cautious regarding the philosophical implications, particularly the notion of indeterminacy at the heart of quantum phenomena. These reflections were characteristic of his careful, contemplative approach. He engaged deeply with ideas, considered alternative frameworks, and articulated concerns with patience and subtle reasoning. Rather than seeking to dismiss or dominate debate, Einstein sought to clarify concepts, illuminate inconsistencies, and encourage continued exploration. Amid these intellectual pursuits, Einstein remained attuned to the broader beauty and coherence of the universe. He often reflected on the harmony inherent in natural law, the subtle symmetries that connected energy, mass, and motion, and the elegance underlying complex phenomena. These reflections were not merely aesthetic, they were integral to his scientific reasoning. By cultivating an awareness of patterns and interconnections, Einstein's contemplative approach enabled him to perceive insights that eluded less patient inquiry. His understanding of the universe was both analytical and meditative, a synthesis of precise observation and reflective imagination. Einstein's engagement with teaching and mentorship continued to flourish. He encouraged students to pursue understanding through curiosity, reflection, and careful experimentation, emphasizing the importance of patience and attention to detail. His guidance was understated yet profound. He modeled the rhythm of thoughtful inquiry, demonstrating that discovery is not a rush to conclusion, but a gradual unfolding of insight. Students and colleagues alike were inspired not only by the content of his ideas but by the meditative approach through which he cultivated and communicated them. Throughout this period, Einstein's life exemplified a harmonious interplay of contemplation and action. Intellectual exploration, public engagement, ethical reflection, and personal meditation were integrated seamlessly, forming a rhythm that allowed creativity and insight to flourish. He navigated complexity with subtlety, addressing challenges with patience and careful attention, ensuring that his engagement with the world enhanced rather than disrupted the processes of reflection and discovery. By the end of this decade, Albert Einstein had solidified his role not only as a transformative physicist, but also as a reflective guide in the exploration of knowledge and human understanding. His work demonstrated the power of patience, subtle reasoning, and sustained curiosity. Each theoretical advance, each philosophical reflection, and each thoughtful correspondence was part of a broader, meditative engagement with the universe, an approach that combined intellectual rigor, ethical awareness, and serene attentiveness. In essence, this period of Einstein's life illustrates the profound value of navigating complexity with calm focus. Recognition, professional demands, and philosophical challenges were met not with haste or assertion, but with measured reflection and careful consideration. Through this gentle and deliberate rhythm, Einstein continued to advance scientific understanding while modeling a thoughtful, meditative approach to life itself, one in which curiosity, reflection, and conscientiousness intertwine in quiet harmony. As the 1930s approached, Albert Einstein's life had evolved into a complex but harmonious interplay of scientific innovation, global recognition, and personal reflection. His contributions to physics had already reshaped fundamental understanding, and the wider world increasingly recognized the quiet yet profound depth of his intellect. Yet through the growing public attention and escalating demands on his time, Einstein maintained the meditative, deliberate approach that had defined his life, a gentle rhythm of reflection, observation, and inquiry, allowing insight to flourish amid complexity. During this period, Einstein continued to explore the boundaries of theoretical physics. While general relativity had revolutionized concepts of space and time, he turned toward unifying the forces of nature, seeking a coherent framework that could reconcile gravity with electromagnetism and other emerging fields. These investigations were intricate and demanding, requiring him to navigate a landscape of subtle mathematical relationships and abstract conceptual structures. His method was consistent, careful calculation intertwined with imaginative visualization, supported by a deep patience cultivated over decades. Each step forward emerged not from urgency, but from sustained reflection, as if ideas were allowed to ripen naturally until clarity emerged. The global recognition Einstein received during this period was unprecedented for a scientist. Invitations to lecture spanned continents, and his presence at international conferences attracted the attention of fellow physicists, journalists, and the public alike. Yet, Einstein approached these experiences with measured calm. He treated each lecture and interaction as an opportunity to encourage reflection, not as a platform for self-promotion. His explanations, precise yet contemplative, invited audiences to engage deeply with the principles he elucidated, fostering a thoughtful consideration of ideas rather than immediate acceptance or applause. In this way, he shaped both scientific discourse and public understanding with quiet, enduring influence. The 1930s also brought personal and societal challenges. Einstein, of Jewish heritage, was increasingly aware of the political upheavals in Europe, particularly the rise of oppressive regimes and threats to intellectual freedom. Though his focus remained on scientific inquiry, he did not retreat from the moral dimensions of these developments. He spoke and wrote on the importance of justice, human rights, and the responsibility of scholars to defend truth and reason. His engagement was contemplative rather than confrontational, emphasizing the ethical responsibilities inherent in knowledge and the subtle ways individuals can contribute to preserving integrity and human dignity. Scientifically, Einstein's reflections on quantum mechanics became a central aspect of his work and discourse. While he had contributed foundational concepts to the emerging theory, he remained skeptical of interpretations that implied fundamental randomness or indeterminacy in nature. His famous remark that God does not play dice reflected a deep philosophical conviction. The universe, in his view, possessed an underlying order awaiting discovery. These contemplations, though often debated by his peers, exemplified the gentle rigor of his intellectual approach. Persistent questioning, careful reasoning, and a willingness to explore alternative perspectives without abandoning patience or clarity. Amid these intellectual and social responsibilities, Einstein preserved routines that nurtured his inner life and sustained creativity. Music continued to offer meditation and solace. Long walks provided moments for reflection, and private study remained the cornerstone of his work. These practices reinforced the subtle rhythms of thought that allowed him to navigate complexity without haste, ensuring that even amid public visibility, his intellectual focus remained undisturbed. During this period, Einstein also engaged more actively with the philosophical and educational dimensions of science. He corresponded with thinkers across disciplines, offering reflections on the nature of reality, the ethics of discovery, and the societal role of knowledge. These interactions were marked by patience and subtle guidance, reflecting a belief that understanding grows gradually through dialogue, observation, and reflection. Einstein's influence, therefore, extended beyond technical physics into the cultivation of thoughtfulness, critical inquiry, and ethical engagement. The culmination of these efforts was a unique blend of discovery and influence. Einstein's theoretical work, public engagement, and personal reflections created a life rhythm in which intellectual exploration was harmoniously integrated with social consciousness and ethical consideration. He demonstrated that a life of thought could be both profoundly productive and deeply humane, that quiet reflection could coexist with global attention, and that sustained inquiry could yield insight while maintaining personal integrity and meditative focus. By the mid-1930s, Einstein's presence was felt not only in laboratories and lecture halls but also in the broader cultural imagination. He had become a symbol of thoughtful inquiry, a model of reflective engagement with the natural world and human society alike. His life exemplified the power of patience, the importance of maintaining inner rhythm, and the subtle art of nurturing insight without succumbing to haste, distraction, or superficial acclaim. In sum, this period reflects the gentle but far-reaching impact of a contemplative approach to life and knowledge. Einstein's continued research into theoretical physics, combined with his ethical reflections, public engagement, and personal meditative practices, illustrates the enduring value of slow, deliberate thought. Insight, discovery, and influence emerged not from spectacle or urgency, but from sustained curiosity, patient reflection, and a deep attentiveness to both the universe and the human condition. Through the calm unfolding of these years, Einstein not only extended the frontiers of science but also modeled a way of living in which intellect, imagination, and ethical awareness coexist in serene harmony. His journey during this period demonstrates that profound understanding and subtle influence often arise from quiet constancy, careful attention, and the patient cultivation of thought, a lesson that resonates far beyond the confines of physics and into the broader rhythms of life itself. The late 1930s brought profound changes to Albert Einstein's life, both personally and professionally. The political turbulence sweeping across Europe, particularly the rise of oppressive regimes in Germany, created an environment in which intellectual freedom was increasingly threatened. For Einstein, whose Jewish heritage and outspoken advocacy for reason and human rights made him particularly vulnerable, the need to seek a safer and more stable environment became undeniable. Yet even in the midst of uncertainty, his approach remained measured and contemplative, guided by the calm rhythms of reflection that had defined his life for decades. In 1933, Einstein made the momentous decision to leave Germany, accepting a position at the Institute for Advanced Study in Princeton, New Jersey. The move was both practical and symbolic, a transition from a world where freedom of thought was imperiled to one where intellectual inquiry could continue unimpeded. The journey to the United States marked not only a geographical relocation but also a subtle shift in the rhythms of daily life. Einstein embraced his new environment with the same reflective approach he had applied to all significant transitions, taking time to observe, adapt, and integrate himself into the academic and cultural landscape of his adopted country. At Princeton, Einstein's daily routine reflected a balance between professional responsibility, intellectual exploration, and personal contemplation. His mornings were often devoted to rigorous reflection on unresolved problems in theoretical physics, particularly the pursuit of a unified field theory, a framework that could reconcile the forces of gravity and electromagnetism. Even as he navigated complex mathematical structures and abstract conceptual landscapes, he maintained a steady pace, allowing insights to emerge gradually rather than forcing immediate solutions. The discipline of patience, cultivated over decades, enabled him to explore the universe's subtle intricacies with both rigor and equanimity. The serene environment of Princeton offered Einstein the space to continue his work undisturbed, but it also introduced new avenues for engagement. He participated in seminars, collaborated with colleagues, and corresponded with scientists around the world. Yet even in these professional interactions, his style remained contemplative and measured. He valued thoughtful dialogue, subtle questioning, and the careful weighing of evidence over rapid assertion. In this way, he influenced both the content and the tone of intellectual discourse, modeling a reflective approach that encouraged clarity, patience, and depth of understanding. While his focus remained on physics, Einstein also became increasingly engaged with social and political issues. The rise of fascism and the outbreak of global conflict heightened his awareness of the ethical responsibilities of scientists and intellectuals. He spoke and wrote about peace, human rights, and the dangers of unchecked political power. His reflections were deliberate and reasoned, emphasizing moral responsibility without resorting to alarmist rhetoric. Einstein believed that knowledge carried an inherent ethical dimension, and that the cultivation of understanding was inseparable from conscientious engagement with society. In parallel, Einstein's personal life continued to be grounded in quiet habits and contemplative practices. Music, a lifelong companion, remained central, offering solace and inspiration. Long walks, periods of solitary reflection, and close, thoughtful exchanges with friends and colleagues nurtured his inner life. Even amid the pressures of relocation, international recognition, and the escalating crises of the world, these routines provided stability, reinforcing the meditative rhythms essential to both his well-being and his creative productivity. During this period, Einstein's research took on a deeper philosophical dimension. While pursuing unification theories and exploring the foundations of quantum mechanics, he reflected on the nature of reality, causality, and human comprehension. These contemplations were not distractions from technical work, but integral to it, shaping the questions he asked and the methods he employed. By maintaining a reflective balance, he was able to probe both abstract theoretical structures and their broader implications with remarkable clarity. The years at Princeton also allowed Einstein to mentor younger scientists, fostering an environment of intellectual curiosity and disciplined inquiry. He encouraged students and colleagues to pursue understanding patiently, to embrace uncertainty without fear, and to integrate observation, reasoning, and imagination in their investigations. His guidance was subtle yet profound, exemplifying the meditative approach to inquiry that had characterized his life from the earliest days of curiosity in Munich to the quiet reflection of the patent office and the lecture halls of Europe. Despite the upheavals of migration and the global tensions surrounding him, Einstein's life in the United States remained marked by a gentle rhythm of thought, observation, and reflection. He continued to explore the universe's most fundamental questions, balancing the precision of mathematics with the subtleties of imagination. His work during these years reflects not only continued scientific contribution, but also the enduring value of a meditative approach to life, patient, attentive, and deeply connected to both intellectual and ethical dimensions of existence. In essence, Einstein's migration to the United States illustrates the interplay between circumstance and temperament. Faced with external pressures and global uncertainty, he maintained the internal stability and reflective practices that had always guided his inquiry. This period exemplifies the power of deliberate, patient engagement, demonstrating how a calm and contemplative mind can navigate change, continue creative work, and exert enduring influence even amid upheaval. By the end of these early years in Princeton, Einstein had established a life that combined safety, intellectual freedom, and ethical engagement. He continued to push the boundaries of physics, mentor new generations of thinkers, and reflect deeply on the philosophical and social implications of knowledge. The serene and deliberate rhythms of his daily practice, balancing contemplation, research, and reflection, allowed him to sustain both personal and professional fulfillment, providing a model of thoughtful engagement with the world that transcends disciplines, geographies, and eras. The mid-1930s to early 1940s presented Albert Einstein with a complex and challenging world. The rise of fascism in Europe, the outbreak of war, and the accompanying ethical dilemmas created an environment in which scientific and social responsibilities became deeply intertwined. Yet even as the external world grew increasingly turbulent, Einstein maintained the meditative, deliberate approach that had always guided his life. His days were carefully balanced between contemplation, theoretical research, and engagement with the ethical and political currents of the time. Einstein's primary focus remained on theoretical physics, particularly the pursuit of a unified field theory. He explored the relationships between gravity, electromagnetism, and the emerging understanding of quantum phenomena, seeking a coherent mathematical framework that could encompass multiple fundamental forces. These investigations demanded both rigor and imagination. Einstein often spent long hours visualizing abstract structures, sketching relationships, and following the subtle patterns that connected energy, mass, and space-time. His approach was patient and reflective. Insights emerged gradually, nurtured by quiet focus and contemplative exploration, rather than hasty calculation or external pressure. While immersed in theoretical research, Einstein also grappled with the growing implications of physics for society. The development of nuclear fission and the potential for unprecedented weaponry weighed heavily on his mind. Though he did not directly participate in the creation of atomic weapons, he recognized the ethical responsibility of scientists to anticipate the consequences of their work. His reflections were measured and deliberate, emphasizing caution, dialogue, and the need for moral awareness alongside technical achievement. In 1939, he co-signed a letter to the U.S. government warning of the potential for Nazi Germany to develop powerful nuclear weapons. A careful and conscientious act guided by principle rather than ambition. During these years, Einstein's intellectual engagement also extended into the public sphere. He wrote and spoke on the responsibilities of scientists, the importance of intellectual freedom, and the necessity of ethical reflection in times of crisis. His messages were gentle yet persuasive, aimed at fostering careful thought and responsible action rather than fear or urgency. Through these interventions, he demonstrated the integration of intellectual rigor and moral consciousness, showing how reflection could guide both personal and collective decisions. Even amidst global tension, Einstein preserved personal practices that nurtured his inner life. Music remained a source of meditation, offering both solace and inspiration. Long walks in the quietude of Princeton or along nearby paths provided opportunities for deep contemplation, He often used these moments to reflect not only on abstract scientific problems, but also on broader questions of human nature, society, and the interplay of knowledge and ethics. These routines maintained a meditative rhythm, allowing him to sustain clarity of thought despite external pressures. Einstein's engagement with the scientific community continued, though increasingly adapted to the realities of wartime. He corresponded with colleagues across continents, shared insights, and collaborated through letters and carefully structured discussions. He encouraged patience, precision, and reflective dialogue, reinforcing a culture of inquiry that valued clarity and ethical awareness as much as technical competence. In mentoring students and young researchers, he emphasized the importance of slow, deliberate thinking, careful observation, and imaginative exploration, principles that had guided him throughout his life. During this period, Einstein also reflected deeply on the philosophical dimensions of physics. The development of quantum mechanics continued to challenge classical notions of determinism, and he remained cautious in his interpretation of these findings. His reflections were not dismissive but contemplative. He sought coherence, clarity, and an understanding of the underlying order of the universe. This philosophical engagement, intertwined with his technical work, exemplified the harmonious integration of analytical rigor and reflective insight. Even in moments of recognition and public attention, Einstein maintained his characteristic calm. Awards, invitations, and global acclaim were met with quiet reflection, not ostentation. He focused on the pursuit of knowledge, the mentorship of others, and the cultivation of ethical awareness. This balance of public engagement and private reflection allowed him to navigate the increasing complexity of the world without losing the meditative, deliberate rhythm that sustained both creativity and insight. By the early 1940s, Einstein's life embodied the coexistence of profound intellectual achievement and conscientious engagement with the broader world. His research in theoretical physics continued to push boundaries, exploring subtle patterns in the cosmos and seeking unifying principles. Simultaneously, his reflections on society, ethics, and human responsibility offered a model of thoughtful engagement in turbulent times. Through measured action, contemplative inquiry, and the patient integration of thought and observation, Einstein demonstrated how a life devoted to reflection and understanding could influence both science and society. The integration of contemplative thought with responsible action defined this period. Einstein's insights into the fundamental structure of the universe were inseparable from his reflections on the ethical dimensions of knowledge. By maintaining deliberate, reflective practices amidst global uncertainty, he exemplified how intellectual pursuit and moral awareness can coexist harmoniously, guiding both discovery and action. In essence, these years illustrate the subtle but profound ways in which reflection, patience, and conscientiousness shape not only scientific achievement, but also human influence. Einstein's meditative approach allowed him to navigate challenges, sustain creativity, and offer guidance to others, providing a model of thoughtful engagement that transcends the immediate circumstances of war and upheaval. His life during this period underscores the enduring value of calm, deliberate inquiry, both in understanding the universe and in shaping a responsible, ethical response to the world around us. As the 1940s progressed, Albert Einstein's life entered a period of deep reflection and continued intellectual exploration. Having navigated both personal and global upheavals, he now turned much of his attention towards synthesizing knowledge, refining theories, and contemplating the broader significance of scientific discovery for humanity. His approach remained calm, measured, and meditative, reflecting a lifelong rhythm of patient inquiry, contemplative observation, and deliberate engagement with complex ideas. Einstein continued to focus on the pursuit of a unified field theory, seeking a coherent mathematical and conceptual framework that could reconcile the fundamental forces of nature. These investigations were intricate, demanding both precision and imagination. His process was deliberate. He allowed ideas to develop gradually, considering multiple perspectives, revisiting assumptions, and integrating insights from decades of prior work. The act of discovery for Einstein was not a race but a continuous unfolding. a patient cultivation of understanding nurtured by reflection and careful reasoning. Simultaneously, Einstein maintained an enduring engagement with the philosophical dimensions of physics. He questioned the nature of reality, the foundations of causality, and the implications of quantum mechanics, often reflecting on what the emerging theories suggested about the limits and potential of human knowledge. These contemplations were gentle, yet profound. He did not seek to assert absolute answers, but to illuminate subtle connections, encourage critical thought, and explore the harmony underlying the universe's complexity. His reflections bridged the abstract and the tangible, grounding speculative inquiry in the pursuit of coherent understanding. Einstein's ethical and social considerations remained intertwined with his scientific work. He continued to speak and write on human rights, the responsibilities of intellectuals, and the importance of moral courage in times of uncertainty. The rise of global conflict, the development and use of nuclear weapons, and the broader challenges of human society reinforced his belief that knowledge carries inherent responsibility. His engagement was thoughtful, emphasizing reflection and conscience over dramatic declaration, modeling an approach in which intellect and ethics coexisted in careful balance. During this period, Einstein also devoted time to mentoring and correspondence. He encouraged colleagues, students, and younger scientists to approach questions patiently, to integrate observation, reasoning, and imagination, and to reflect on the broader implications of their work. His guidance was subtle, but deeply influential, shaping not only the technical competence of those he mentored, but also their philosophical and ethical sensibilities. Through these interactions, Einstein's legacy extended beyond his own discoveries, nurturing a culture of thoughtful, conscientious inquiry. Personal routines continued to sustain Einstein's inner life. Music, long walks, reading, and quiet moments of contemplation provided the meditative space essential for deep thought. Even as global attention and public responsibilities increased, these practices allowed him to preserve the rhythm and focus necessary for sustained intellectual work. His life demonstrated that reflection, routine, and attentiveness are integral to both creativity and understanding, allowing insight to emerge naturally within the context of daily experience. The period also saw Einstein engaging with broader questions about the human condition and the role of science in society. He reflected on the interplay between knowledge, power, and responsibility, emphasizing the importance of using understanding to promote the welfare of humanity. His writings conveyed a measured, contemplative perspective. The pursuit of truth and insight is inseparable from reflection on ethical and societal consequences, and thoughtful engagement can guide the application of knowledge in constructive ways. As his career matured, Einstein's influence became increasingly global. His scientific discoveries continued to shape research, while his reflections on society, ethics, and the nature of understanding resonated across disciplines and cultures. Yet despite widespread recognition, he maintained a remarkable humility and calm. He did not equate fame with accomplishment, nor did he allow external attention to disrupt the meditative rhythm that nurtured his insights. In this, he offered a model of life in which creativity, reflection, and conscientiousness coexist seamlessly. By the late 1940s, Einstein's life had evolved into a synthesis of thought, reflection, and influence. His contributions to physics had redefined fundamental concepts. His ethical and philosophical reflections had informed broader discourse, and his personal practices had cultivated clarity, creativity, and resilience. In these later years, he exemplified the integration of intellect and reflection, demonstrating that the pursuit of knowledge is most profound when accompanied by ethical awareness, patience, and contemplative engagement. In essence, this period illustrates the maturation of Einstein's legacy, a life characterized not only by groundbreaking scientific discoveries, but also by thoughtful reflection on the human and ethical dimensions of knowledge. His approach combined deep technical expertise with philosophical inquiry, ethical reflection, and personal meditation, creating a model of intellectual and moral engagement that continues to inspire. Einstein's later years thus reveal a subtle yet profound truth: the enduring impact of a life devoted to calm, deliberate thought, integrated with ethical reflection and compassionate awareness. His journey demonstrates that insight, creativity, and influence are most enduring when nurtured through patience, reflection, and the harmonious cultivation of mind, heart, and conscience. As Albert Einstein entered the final decades of his life, the rhythm of his existence reflected a harmonious blend of continued intellectual pursuit, contemplative reflection, and subtle engagement with the broader world. Though the pace of discovery inevitably slowed with age, his curiosity remained undiminished, and his daily life continued to be guided by the meditative practices that had sustained him throughout his extraordinary journey. In Princeton, Einstein maintained a disciplined routine. Mornings were often devoted to contemplation and calculation, with afternoons reserved for correspondence, reading, and occasional lectures. His work on the unified field theory persisted, even as he confronted increasingly complex mathematical challenges. The approach he took was characterized by patience and imagination. Rather than forcing solutions, he allowed ideas to develop gradually, sketching intricate patterns, testing hypotheses, and refining assumptions with a careful, methodical hand. Each equation, each theoretical consideration emerged from sustained reflection, as if the insights themselves required time to ripen into clarity. Even as he focused on the frontiers of physics, Einstein's attention to ethical and philosophical concerns continued to deepen. The post-war era brought new challenges, including the proliferation of nuclear weapons and the responsibilities of scientists in influencing global policy. Einstein addressed these concerns thoughtfully, speaking and writing on the necessity of reason, moral responsibility, and humanistic values. He advocated for the careful application of knowledge, emphasizing that discovery and insight are inseparable from conscience and ethical consideration. His reflections were contemplative rather than urgent, inviting careful thought and considered action rather than imposing directives. During this period, Einstein also dedicated himself to mentorship and correspondence. Letters flowed to and from colleagues across the globe, offering guidance, critique, and encouragement. He nurtured the next generation of thinkers, demonstrating the principles of reflective inquiry and patient exploration that had guided his own intellectual journey. His advice often emphasized the integration of imagination, observation, and logical reasoning, as well as the importance of maintaining ethical and philosophical awareness alongside technical rigor. In this way, Einstein's influence extended far beyond his own work, shaping both the intellectual and moral development of those who would carry forward the scientific enterprise. Music and quiet contemplation remained central to his daily life. The violin, played in moments of solitude or in informal gatherings, provided both comfort and inspiration. Walks through serene landscapes offered opportunities for reflection, allowing his mind to wander freely across scientific and philosophical terrains. These practices reinforced the meditative rhythm essential to sustained creativity, enabling him to continue producing insights even as the demands of public attention and aging subtly reshaped his daily existence. Einstein's engagement with the world, though increasingly filtered through careful reflection, remained significant. He contributed to international discourse on peace, human rights, and the responsible use of scientific knowledge. He urged dialogue, patience, and reasoned action, advocating for approaches that were guided by conscience and understanding, rather than by reactionary impulses or immediate gain. His voice, though calm and measured, carried enduring influence, offering principles that extended beyond the laboratory into the ethical and philosophical dimensions of society. Despite the recognition and acclaim he had garnered over decades, Einstein remained remarkably humble. Fame never distracted from his work, and accolades were met with quiet appreciation rather than celebration. He continued to immerse himself in questions of fundamental physics, pondering the unity of natural laws, the subtleties of quantum phenomena, and the interplay between space, time, and energy. In this late stage of life, his intellectual pursuits were not driven by ambition, but by an enduring curiosity and a profound desire to understand the intricate order underlying the universe. The final years also offered Einstein moments of reflection on his personal journey. From his early fascination with geometry and music in Munich, to the contemplative hours at the patent office, the thoughtful explorations in European universities, and the serene intellectual life in Princeton, he considered how patient inquiry, imagination, and ethical awareness had shaped both his discoveries and his broader influence. This reflective stance reinforced the importance of integrating thought, observation, and conscientious engagement throughout a life devoted to understanding. In the midst of these contemplations, Einstein continued to correspond with thinkers across disciplines, engaging in philosophical and ethical discourse and reflecting on the role of science in human progress. These interactions were characterized by subtle guidance, patient explanation, and the encouragement of careful reasoning. His intellectual influence thus remained vibrant, extending through both direct mentorship and the broader circulation of ideas, underscoring the enduring impact of a reflective and principled approach to knowledge. In sum, Einstein's final years exemplify the integration of reflection, inquiry, and ethical awareness. His work continued to push the boundaries of theoretical physics. His guidance nurtured the development of future generations, and his contemplative practices sustained creativity and insight. Even as age imposed natural limitations, the meditative, deliberate rhythm that had characterized his life enabled him to maintain clarity of thought, serenity of mind, and enduring influence. Through these years, one sees the culmination of a life lived in alignment with curiosity, ethical reflection, and patient intellectual engagement. Einstein's journey demonstrates that profound understanding, meaningful contribution, and subtle influence are cultivated not through haste or spectacle, but through sustained attention, contemplation, and a deep commitment to both discovery and conscience. His final years reflect the quiet yet transformative power of a life devoted to inquiry, reflection, and ethical engagement, an enduring legacy that continues to inspire and guide those who seek understanding and wisdom. In the final stretch of Albert Einstein's life, his attention was divided between consolidating decades of scientific inquiry and reflecting deeply on the human condition. Though many of his pioneering discoveries were already widely recognized, Einstein remained intellectually restless, continually seeking patterns, coherence, and unity in the natural world. At the same time, the events of a turbulent century, the rise and fall of regimes, the development and use of nuclear weapons, and the unfolding of global conflicts, prompted him to consider the ethical, social, and philosophical dimensions of knowledge more intensely than ever before. Einstein's scientific focus during these years remained on the unification of physical laws. He worked on advanced formulations that sought to reconcile gravity with electromagnetism, exploring mathematical constructs and abstract geometries that could provide a coherent framework for the fundamental forces. The process was contemplative and iterative. He allowed ideas to develop slowly, revisiting earlier assumptions, refining equations, and engaging with the subtleties of theoretical physics. The work exemplified his meditative approach, combining careful reasoning with imaginative visualization, each insight emerging through patient observation rather than immediate assertion. Simultaneously, Einstein continued to ponder the philosophical implications of physics. He reflected on the nature of reality, the role of human perception in understanding the universe, and the subtle interplay between determinism and uncertainty as revealed by quantum mechanics. Unlike some contemporaries, he approached these questions without urgency, favoring clarity, coherence, and thoughtful debate. These reflections were deeply interwoven with his ethical consciousness. Understanding the universe was inseparable from understanding the responsibilities of those who engage in discovery. Einstein's ethical and social engagement remained an essential facet of his late life. He corresponded with world leaders, scholars, and the public, urging thoughtful consideration of human rights, global peace, and the ethical use of science. He emphasized measured reflection over reaction, reasoning over rhetoric, and the cultivation of moral awareness alongside intellectual achievement. Even when addressing urgent matters, his style remained calm and meditative, illustrating that influence and advocacy can coexist with patience, thoughtfulness, and humility. Music and contemplative practice continued to nourish Einstein's inner life. The violin, long a companion in both solitude and gentle social gatherings, offered moments of meditation and creative inspiration. Walks, often taken in the quietude of Princeton's landscapes, provided a natural space for reflection, allowing his mind to traverse scientific, philosophical, and ethical terrains with a gentle fluidity. These habits reinforced the meditative rhythm that underpinned his creativity, insight, and resilience throughout a life of rigorous inquiry. In mentoring and correspondence, Einstein continued to exert subtle but profound influence. He encouraged students, colleagues, and younger scientists to embrace patience, reflective observation, and careful reasoning. His guidance extended beyond technical instruction, emphasizing the integration of imagination, analytical rigor, and ethical consideration. In this way, he nurtured not only scientific understanding but also philosophical and moral awareness, shaping the approaches and perspectives of those who would carry forward his legacy. During these years, Einstein also reflected on the interconnectedness of knowledge and human experience. He considered how scientific discovery, ethical reflection, and societal engagement form an interwoven tapestry, each reinforcing the other. Insight for Einstein was not merely technical but also profoundly human. It required awareness of consequences, appreciation of beauty and order, and a conscientious approach to the impact of ideas on the broader world. The consolidation of Einstein's scientific contributions during this period also involved reflection on their historical and cultural significance. He understood the revolutionary impact of relativity, the insights of quantum mechanics, and the subtle interconnections that underpinned his work. Yet he did not rest in celebration of achievement. Instead, he viewed knowledge as a continuing journey, one that demanded humility, attentiveness, and responsibility. This perspective allowed him to frame his discoveries within a broader ethical and philosophical context, enhancing their significance and providing guidance for future inquiry. Einstein's life in these final years demonstrates the integration of intellectual pursuit, ethical reflection, and contemplative practice. His calm, deliberate approach enabled him to navigate complex scientific, social, and personal landscapes without losing focus, composure, or moral clarity. Insight and influence arose naturally from this sustained rhythm, illustrating the power of patience, reflection, and conscientious engagement in shaping both understanding and human experience. By the end of this period, Einstein had solidified a legacy that encompassed not only groundbreaking scientific achievements, but also profound humanistic insights. His life exemplified the integration of intellect and ethics, creativity and reflection, knowledge and conscience. Each discovery, each correspondence, and each contemplative moment contributed to a body of work and a philosophy of life that continues to inspire. A reminder that the pursuit of understanding, when guided by patience, reflection, and ethical awareness, leaves a lasting impact far beyond the confines of laboratory or lecture hall. As Albert Einstein's life drew toward its natural conclusion in the mid-20th century, he remained a figure of serene contemplation, intellectual rigor, and ethical mindfulness. The final years of his life were marked not by frenetic activity or dramatic upheaval, but by a continued rhythm of thought, reflection, and subtle engagement with the world. A gentle unfolding of insight and understanding that exemplified the meditative approach he had cultivated throughout his extraordinary journey. Einstein's work on the unified field theory continued, pursued with quiet dedication. Though the ultimate resolution of this theoretical pursuit would remain beyond his lifetime, the process itself embodied the essence of his approach: patient exploration, careful visualization, and persistent questioning. Each equation, each conceptual sketch was treated as a step along a continuous path of discovery, where the act of inquiry was as significant as any final conclusion. This mindset, rooted in a deep appreciation for the elegance and coherence of the universe, defined his intellectual life to the very end. Alongside scientific exploration, Einstein's reflections on humanity, society, and ethics became increasingly profound. He considered the responsibilities of intellectuals, the importance of human rights, and the delicate interplay between knowledge and moral action. His contemplations were neither prescriptive nor alarmist. Rather, they offered gentle guidance, encouraging careful thought, empathy, and conscientious engagement. He envisioned a world in which insight and understanding are harmonized with compassion and ethical responsibility, demonstrating that the pursuit of knowledge is inseparable from the cultivation of human values. Music and solitude continued to provide balance and inspiration. The violin, once a companion in childhood curiosity and now a source of meditative reflection, offered moments of respite and creativity. Long walks, often in quiet natural settings, allowed Einstein to weave scientific, philosophical, and personal reflections together, fostering an inner clarity that underpinned both thought and action. These routines were not mere leisure, they were integral to the maintenance of a reflective and attentive mind, sustaining the calm, deliberate rhythms essential to his creativity and insight. In his correspondence and interactions, Einstein maintained a consistent emphasis on patient reasoning, thoughtful exploration, and ethical consideration. He mentored young scientists, encouraged dialogue across disciplines, and offered guidance that integrated technical insight with philosophical awareness. His influence, therefore, extended far beyond the specifics of theoretical physics, shaping the approach and sensibilities of those who would carry forward scientific and ethical inquiry for generations. Even as global attention and accolades continued, Einstein's humility remained evident. Fame did not distract from his work, nor did it alter the careful meditative pace that characterized his daily life. He approached both acclaim and criticism with equanimity, maintaining focus on reflection, inquiry, and ethical responsibility. In this, he exemplified a model of intellectual life in which recognition is secondary to understanding, and influence arises naturally from sustained curiosity, insight, and conscientious action. As the decades of his work coalesced into a singular, luminous legacy, Einstein's life became a testament to the integration of discovery, reflection, and ethical mindfulness. His scientific contributions, revolutionizing relativity, advancing quantum theory, and pursuing unifying principles, remain cornerstones of modern physics. Yet, equally significant is the example he set: a life lived in attentive reflection, patient inquiry, and conscientious engagement with both the universe and humanity. In these final years, one observes the enduring qualities that defined Einstein's journey: curiosity tempered by patience, imagination guided by rigor, and knowledge pursued alongside ethical reflection. His life illustrates that the pursuit of understanding is most profound when coupled with humility, ethical awareness, and a meditative attention to both detail and overarching patterns. In this calm, deliberate manner, he left behind a legacy that transcends science, touching philosophy, education, ethics, and the broader human aspiration for insight and wisdom. As we reflect on the full arc of Einstein's life, from the early fascination with the geometry of the world, through decades of contemplative research and global engagement, to the quiet yet profound insights of his later years, we recognize a continuous thread: the cultivation of thought as a gentle, deliberate, and ethical practice. His journey reminds us that true understanding is not rushed, that insight arises from reflection, and that knowledge carries with it an enduring responsibility to the world and to humanity. In the stillness of contemplation, in the patient unfolding of inquiry, and in the integration of intellect and conscience, Albert Einstein's life offers a model for thoughtful living and lasting influence. As his story concludes, we are invited to carry forward the quiet lessons of reflection, curiosity, and conscientious engagement, a subtle call to nurture our own minds and hearts, to seek understanding with patience, and to approach both knowledge and life with calm attentiveness and ethical awareness. With these gentle reflections, we end the chronicle of Albert Einstein's life, leaving listeners with a sense of calm curiosity, contemplative insight, and the enduring inspiration of a mind that moved gracefully through the mysteries of the universe.